In today's live stream, we're going to do 5 profiles for medium roasted beans. Now, this is what I drink actually mostly, and so you would have thought that I would do it first, but this is actually the most difficult of all of them. And that's because medium roasted encompasses a very wide compass from medium light to medium dark. I know they both say medium in them, but let me just define what I mean by light, medium, and dark, and you'll see where the problem is. So for light roasts, I think of any bean that doesn't taste of the roasting process. So in the bag description, not only will you not see chocolate, but you shouldn't see caramel either. You might see pear. Pear would be a flavor sometimes that people give for a very light roasting flavor, but that would be as dark as you'd see it, and you definitely wouldn't see toffee, nor would you see bitter chocolate. Medium would be kind of bang in the middle, meaning there's no fruity light flavor. Something that's actually positively medium is just going to be chocolate. Maybe they're going to talk about red fruits, maybe. And then dark, you're having bitter chocolate and burnt notes as well. They might not say burnt notes on the bag, but you can certainly smell them. So the challenge is that medium is right in the middle, because medium light is going to give you flavors of the roasting process. So you're going to have right in the middle chocolate. Darker, you might have toffee, and lighter, you might have caramel. Really light, you might have pear, but that's where medium light is sitting, is definitely giving you chocolate flavors, but no bitter chocolate. And then medium dark is going to be no fruit really at all. None of the fruity flavors are going to be there, but none of the char either. So if you're a fan of dark roasted coffee and you're wondering what to try next, I would probably suggest you try medium dark roasted, because you'll still get that bitter chocolate that you like, but what you will no longer have is the burn flavors, the oxidation, the rancidity that comes from oils coming out. Medium is kind of the most boring of all of them. When you talk about a medium roasted bean, you probably talk about something that's just comfort food. If it's an espresso, you just sip it and it's pleasant. If it's a milked espresso drink, it's just a nice base. So generally, people are talking about medium dark for the bitter chocolate flavors, or medium light. Medium is almost like an insult. It just doesn't really sit anywhere. Most people who get on this espresso adventure already are in a medium to dark world, and as they buy a nicer machine, they tend to go lighter and lighter roast over time. And where they settle kind of depends on their tolerance for more difficult flavors, such as bitterness and acidity. And when I started, I was absolutely a fan of Italian roasts, and I didn't even drink medium. I just drank dark roasted coffee. That's what I liked, and I milked it. And then way back when, I would even add chocolate syrup to it. So, but as I got better at espresso, I started moving more towards the milk chocolate world, what I call like Lindt chocolate, where you have layers of chocolates. You still have fruitiness, and you have a lot of complexity, but nothing unpleasant, still very comfortable. Where I personally have landed now is medium light, where I think a lot of people land. I think when we survey our customers face to face, we're mostly getting people in the medium light world. In this video, we're going to talk about 5 different approaches, but here are the profiles from Dflow, a flow profile for milky drinks, but there's also a flow profile for espresso, adaptive and Londinium, and then finally Dflow. And Dflow is kind of a category of its own because it can be many profiles, and I'll talk about that a bit more. So the reason I talked about what are medium beans is because how we extract them and what we're trying to do with them really affects what we do here. We're going to start with a default profile, and the reason it's the default profile is not because it's boring, but because it works. It's a very classic profile. Can you hit settings and let's take a look at it? So here it is going to 8.6 bar with a fast pre-infusion coming down to 6 bar. Now that's not that dissimilar to the best overall profile, but this is essentially the traditional lever profile when people would make a shot in 25 to say 35 seconds, take the cup away as it's starting to slow down, and it's just a very straightforward way to make great espresso. When I mean straightforward, I mean straightforward if you happen to have a $3,000 or $4,000 lever machine. Those of you with flat 9-bar machines can't achieve anything like this. So this is the default profile because it does good things. The declining pressure profile here is going to automatically slow the shot down as it extracts, and it peaks for very little time here. And one of the things about this profile and the reason it's default is we have two different grinders here, a very large flat burr grinder that's not going to have many fines, and then a niche grinder that's going to have a lot of fines. More fines helps puck integrity. This default profile works with either grinder. And the reason it works with either grinder is because it doesn't hold peak pressure for very long. And that peak pressure is when the puck integrity is going to be most stressed. And especially with this that doesn't have as many fines, the nicer grinder, more likely to have channeling at that point. So this profile very quickly moves on. Now we could change this right here, this rise and hold from 4 seconds to something longer if our puck integrity was holding. So the nice thing about this default profile is it's meant to fiddle with. So you could change this if your puck integrity was holding really well. You could lower this pressure if your puck integrity is falling apart here. So if you have, say, a grinder that you paid $300 for, or let's say a hand grinder, those things will tend to not be able to survive high pressure. And so lowering this would be a way to deal with that. And then finally, a very middle-of-the-road temperature. This is 88 centigrade for the extraction, which is a really nice temperature for the medium world. Generally, you're going to lower that for darker roasts, and you're going to increase it for lighter roasts. So something like 92, even maybe 94 Celsius for light roasts, and 88 going down to as low as 80 for the very dark roasts. All right, so that's the theory there. Are we all ready to pull a default shot? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Yep. And I've got two different beans here while Mark is going in here, and they're meant to illustrate the two different approaches. So this is from Dark Arts in London. Despite their name of Dark Arts, they're mostly in the light roast world. And this happens to be what I consider a medium dark bean. It's a bean, sorry, there's a lot written on the label here: chocolate, marzipan, cherry, bramble. So the fact that there's chocolate and cherry automatically is telling me this is a darker roast. I mean, cherry is also quite full flavor on the chocolate spectrum. It's not cherry and pineapple, you know, cherry and mango or something a little bit fruity like that. I thought this was a very good, powerful shot. When I made this for my partner, she finds it too intense. I have to more milk in it. It extracts very fully. The more roasted a bean is, the more it's going to give up coffee flavor to the water, and the more intense, like the more the concentration of the espresso is going to be. So darker roast, if you're going to milk it, you're also going to put more milk in. And then over here, we've got some beans from La Chimiste in Bordeaux, France, and these are very much medium light. And they tell me the description here. Okay, they say very little. They just say fruity and complex. And I don't really mind roasters who don't tell me what I'm supposed to taste. But definitely fruity and complex, they're not even making a nod in saying that it might be medium roast. So let's just get 2 cups. And I'm going to put some beans in while Mark makes that shot. So we are using 18-gram baskets like we do for all these. Let's get that top camera for a second. It's not a world of difference. This one is a bit lighter than this one. You can also see there's a few lighter beans, like this is quite a bit lighter, whereas in the dark arts one, it's kind of the other way around. You have some beans that are the same color as that and some other ones that are quite a bit darker. So in deciding, I would really be smelling them, and smell-wise, I'm just getting a whole lot of chocolate. I'm not getting much else there. And smell-wise, caramel and a lot of fruitiness, like red wine fruits, red fruits. Some tropical fruits too. It's kind of amazing, given the roast colors are quite similar, how different this is smelling. And so this, though the color is telling me this is medium, it's smelling fruity. Now, it also means, by looking at the color, I probably don't want to use any of the light roast extraction methods. It's going to over-extract this. It's not going to be pleasant. So something more traditional. This would be what I serve to someone who comes in saying, I like dark roasted coffee, just to see if I can pull them off of the rancid burnt flavors and if they like it. If they're really traditional, they won't. But I'd like to see if I can pull dark roasted people to medium dark, because it removes a lot of the defects. Both these beans, I should mention, nothing bad. So I open them and I'm smelling like the most common defect I would get would be wet cardboard. Like that's a bad smell. How are we doing on the shots here?
Right here.
That looks all right. So this is our default shot here. So looking at this, we got some nice crema. And just going to do that. A reasonable amount of crema. These are the dark art beans. Go ahead. So what are you tasting there, Mark?
I can taste it's quite intense. It just shows up right in the first sip, and dark chocolate, I would say, yeah.
Do you taste any defects? We did dark roast last week. How do you compare this to that?
So compared to last week, I would say last week it's very easy that you end up with those kind of charcoal, more heavier notes in that. And this is more your Belgian dark chocolate, those kind of chocolate pellets that you will use in baking, for example. So that's more pleasant, more delicate, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. For me, this actually is like 2/3 of the flavor I had in those Italian dark roasted beans are here too. I've got absolutely baker's chocolate. I mean, this is intense. There's nothing light chocolate about this. This does not taste like artisanal chocolate. But there's a very slight hint of char in it, but it's like 1/10 of what the Italian bean had. Overall, I'd also say this just tastes way more expensive. I mean, and it probably is 3 to 4 times the price per bean bag of the Italian roast. So what we're getting there is virtually no defects. Very powerful, I agree with you. There's nothing subtle about this, but if you like a medium to dark roasted chocolate milk, this is the coffee version of that. I thought it was pretty full body. There's a little bit of acidity.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think anyone who was a traditional espresso liker would go, that's a traditional espresso. And they'd be happy. Now they might go, so why should I spend a lot of money on this machine? If you've just made me a traditional espresso.
I mean, one thing with D1 is definitely you know where your extraction goes wrong or goes right. Yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, so this was a fairly quick shot, which I'm really okay with on this. So It's a different style. So with this bean, we can pull it two different ways. We can pull it in a way that you and I prefer more, which is not quite as thick. And if there is some range of flavor in it, they'll be there, and that would be faster, right? So we've done 18 in, 37 out here. And the puck integrity was really good. Puck integrity is always going to be good with the darker roasts. They just make life easy. So he went up to 8.6 bar, declined, and then our flow rate increased, and you can see as the pressure went down, the flow rate flattened out. The other thing to know about this profile is it goes to 8.6 bar, not 9. Might be a small thing, but the lower pressure just stresses the machine a little bit less. Something that's not very well known is machines that claim to be 9 bar are actually about 8.6 bar. And the reason for that is they measure their pressure, it's pump, pressure sensor, and then what's called a flow constrictor or gicleur, and then boiler, and then it goes to the group head. And in that chain, there's a bit of airspace in the boiler or anything else could happen and you lose a bit of pressure. And the reason I know it's 8.6 is because at the especially Coffee Association competitions, they recalibrate the machine so that at the group head they're 9 bar. And generally they find they're around 8.5 bar when they are supposedly 9 bar machines. So that's why I did 8.6 bar, because we measure at the group and I was trying to do traditional espresso. One thing to note also, I don't bring the settings up, but you generally don't want to go above 9.5 bar. When people say, why was espresso made at 9 bar, I puzzled over that for a long time. And it was James Hoffman who challenged me at one point, because he'd read something that said, what do you think about this issue that you get more compression and less flow as pressure goes up? And I said, that doesn't make sense. If pressure goes up, flow should go up, right? The harder you push, the more stuff should come out. And so I had a knee-jerk reaction to him. And then the next day I realized we can test this. And the community did. In fact, John Weiss did a Weiss distribution technique. He's an owner and very active. And he did a test at various different pressures. And what he showed was at about 9.5 bar, increasing pressure would decrease flow. It's just the opposite of what you thought. Until 9.5 bar, increased pressure increases flow. 9.5 bar decreases, and at 10.5 bar, it almost shut down completely. And what's interesting is you go up 9.5, 10.5, and it's almost slow, and then if you go back to 9.5, the flow increases again, and then back up. And the reason that test was important is one of the theories was that the high pressure was permanently warping the beans and somehow making them go into a more organized fashion. But we saw that wasn't the case, because when we lowered the pressure from 10.5 to 9.5, the flow went up again, back to 10.5, down, 10.5. And so the current theory, and it's as good as any, is that the bean grounds themselves are essentially distorting under the higher pressure. And when the pressure is then released, they undistort and go back to their normal shape. Okay, so that's a long way of saying, why are we at 9 bar? Because at 9.5 bar, your flow rate decreases as you increase pressure. So 9 bar is a really safe place to go as high pressure as you can before the physical reality of coffee starts to break down, where increased pressure gets less out. So that's why we're at 9 bar. Reality is around 8.6 bar. And we generally find that the puck compresses around 4 bar. And so between 4 and 9 bar is the world of espresso. Generally, people like the flavors starting at 6 bar. That's what people think of as being the range of espresso. So the profile we just saw went to 8.6 bar, lowered to 6, because it's staying inside that range of what is actually still espresso. So a bit of theory for us there. That was the default profile. Great place to start, especially in the world of medium beans. We're not probably going to get a huge amount of fruit from this because there's no pre-infusion. The medium light beans, being lighter roasted, are going to want some more time soaking. So let's go ahead and do the flow profile for milky drinks. So we're at 1.7 mils per second. So there's two profiles, flow profile for milky drinks, flow profile for espresso. They have different flow rates, but the different flow rates derive from different grind sizes. Here, we're going to want to try and make an espresso. So this is not a profile that's used that much, but it's a good theoretical shot. What I mean is there's theory backing it up, which is constant flow is desirable in the extraction of flavors. The tricky bit about this profile is you have to match the flow rate to the grind size or the dose, that combination. So this was set to 1.2 mils per second for milky drinks, and that's because it's assuming a darker roast and quite finely ground and a shot time in the 40 to 50 second range. So if you had a medium dark and you wanted to have a quite thick shot that was just chocolate and not a lot of subtlety, 1.2 mils per second flow rate would be good, but you'd be looking, you want the grind to give you some pressure between 6 and 9 bar. The flow profile for espresso is, I think, at 2 mils per second, and that's asking you to be coarser and to make a faster shot. So those two approaches, and in both cases, pressure is going to go up and go down if you've dialed it in right. Okay? And he's dialed it in nicely. So here we are at a constant flow rate of 1.7. We've gone up to 9 bar, and this curve comes out. Okay? Now at this point, I would probably pull this as a ristretto, and the reason I would is that we've now lost pressure here. Okay? And the reason we've lost pressure is because this flow rate is not enough to maintain this. But this is a classic curve that comes out of the theory of extraction. See how straight this is? This is linear extraction. What's happening is we've got water on the puck, and now coffee material is coming out into our cup. And as coffee material comes out, there's less puck there and less resistance. And this nice linear line here is indicating that nothing went wrong with that. If we had some channeling, it would go like this, and then it would crash. You'd see an inflection. If he was using a grinder with a lot of fines, you might see it go down and then come back up again as the fines were migrating. So this is a really nice cup, and one of the reasons I wanted to pull this shot is we see here, around here, extraction is kind of done. By which I mean the puck resistance should go down as the shot is continuing. Coffee material is coming out of the puck into the cup. So there's less coffee resisting the same amount of water. If pressure is not going down, or it's going down quite slowly, our extraction has stalled. It's taken all the material out that it can. Very little more coffee material is coming out now. And so there is a theory, and I quite like it, of using this kind of profile and then stopping it manually here at the elbow. That's when your extraction has completed. Now, shots like the adaptive profile are a modification of this theory. What adaptive does is look at the flow rate here at this point, and then it continues that flow rate. So adaptive would have continued the flow rate here at about 3 mils per second. And it does that automatically for you. That's why it's called adaptive. Let's have a taste. We are good. Mm-hmm. Wow, that tastes so different. That's crazy. Mm. And what's funny, 23 seconds, almost exactly the amount of time.
Yes.
Tell me what you're tasting there.
It tastes way more fruity notes coming out. Compared to the previous cup, the first one, Dflow profile, I only taste like dark chocolate, more intense. But this one tastes more delicate, and somehow the aftertaste also lasts longer in my mouth.
So here's our flow rate here. During extraction, we had a flow rate of 1.7. Can you hit the back button and let's look at the previous shot?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. So this started at about 1.1 mils per second and ended at 2.9. Okay, so this was kind of all over the place. And the focus of this profile was to maintain pressure. This was a pressure profile. Whereas the one we just did was a flow profile, and the taste that comes out is quite different. This is one, I would say, where maybe crema and flavors that come out under pressure are being really prioritized. Whereas, let's go back to the last one, the most recent one. Whereas this, the pressure was allowed to crash as long as we had constant flow. Almost exactly 1822 seconds versus 1823 seconds. Constant flow versus increasing. And I agree with you. I think I'm really surprised it's even the same bean. Because
Yes.
there actually is some fruit to it. It isn't just a really simple, nice base. this actually feels like a more expensive coffee now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's quite interesting. And what I would do if I wanted to fiddle with this some more is I might change this to be a little bit higher. Let's pull up settings on this. So there's a couple things I would do. One is I might change this 1.7 to go up to 2, which is the flow profile for Espresso. And then I'll just do this instead of describing here. What I might do is instead of having it decline like so, I might have it go up. Okay? And that's because as the puck erodes, pressure goes down. So I might tinker with this and start with a 2 and then start to increase it to try and find the balance between a constant flow and keeping pressure. But, oops, actually I can just type it in. 1.1. Okay, so this shot here from 1.1 to 3 is actually a flow controlled profile that would now mimic what the first default profile did. Because while that other shot was pressure oriented, right, 9 bar or 8.6 bar going down to 6, we saw the flow rate went from 1.1 to 2.9. We can just plug that right in and say we want our flow rate to go from 1.1 to 2.9, and then we'll see what kind of pressure comes out. So it's kind of interesting because with a shot, you can decide, do you want to control pressure or flow? You control one, the other one happens. I think not enough people play with the flow profile shots. And that's because I think of the tradition of everything being pressure oriented because of the plumbing. Mm-hmm. Overpressure valves make it easy to control pressure. Whereas flow is something that they haven't really been able to control except for manual levers visually. Let's go ahead and make a Londinium. Now, Londinium and adaptive are profiles we've talked about before. And the key thing we're going to see that's different is we're going to have a fast fill, but then we're going to have a pause here. And we're going to change beans. We're first going to do the dark arts. Is that right? We said we're going to do Londinium 2 ways, is that what we said?
Yes.
Okay, good. So Londinium is a spring lever profile that has a pause in the middle of it that's pressurized. And I would say the framework of that profile, how that works, is just generally the best. So fast fill with a pause, a soak time, I guess is the way you might call it. Scott Rayo's blooming espresso calls it a bloom time because he has it go so long. And then followed by a pressure rise and then an extraction. And Londinium on the D1 is saved under 2 names, LRV2 and LRV3, because it's the Londinium R machine, and version 2 and version 3. The difference is that at the end of Londinium version 2, if the flow rate's going too high, the profile goes down and goes to a lower flow rate, whereas Londinium version 3 is always pressure controlled. They're both really good. It's really a microscopic difference between them, but try them both. See, yeah, different people like different ones. Here we're using Londinium version 3, which is going to be pressure profiled. The key thing about Londinium is that it has this pressurized soak time, and you don't want to use Londinium for light roast because this here, you can see water is going through the puck, a fair amount of it actually, right? And a lot more than we want. And this shot is going to be too coarse. Okay, so we're going to have to pull this shot again. And I knew it was going to be too coarse because this pressurized time here, so we filled, and then we kept a bit of pressure, 3 bar, on the puck. And then it was supposed to compress and come out nice and thick and even. This profile I wouldn't recommend for light roast because light roasts don't survive this. Light roasts just don't have the viscosity to hold up against a long 3 bar soak time. And the water just kind of pours through and you get a sour shot. With medium light and darker, probably iffy with dark roast, but medium light to medium dark, this works really well. But what you're looking for is dripping here somewhere between 2 and 8 grams. Here we had 17 grams. So that's a really nice way to dial in your grind. And when we talk about Dflow, we'll see that Dflow is able to move beyond this soak time by using the scale, which is a pretty cool trick. So other things we can see besides the shot time 20 seconds, not that far off actually, but the big thing is peak pressure of 5.5 bar and this dripping time, this dripping volume being quite high. So here we are trying it again. So once again, this is dark arts that we're here.
Yes.
Okay. And now our dripping is more under control, so we're at 4 grams. We're probably going to hit 8 grams. Yeah. We hit 10 grams of dripping. So we're still a hair too coarse, but not bad. And notice what this profile has done, which is kind of interesting. It's peaked at just under 7 bar, 6.7 bar. Sorry, 6.9 bar here. It didn't make a gusher. And that's one of the things I like about Londinium. It has some logic in here that I won't go into to prevent a really terrible shot from happening. Shot time 21 seconds. The thing that's going to be different about this is this looks really different from our previous shots, right? Because we have this soak time here before we have the pressure rise. But with shots that have that are darker, they extract quite easily in the water, and this 3 bars here gives us a lot of nice flavors. You don't want to do this with dark roast because you're going to over extract. Don't want to do it with light roast because it'll just pour through. All right, tell me what you're tasting.
There's still acidity similar to the previous one, but it's milder than the flow profile for milky drinks. But I feel like there's more layer to it, right? This one, yeah.
So you're preferring the Londinium like this?
Yes.
Okay.
I would say I'm more like acidity driven. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, what's happening is this phase here is getting us more of like a filter coffee extraction, right? There's this long soak time, so we're getting more flavor out. It's not quite dusty yet. I'm not getting that feeling. It's much less thick, right? The mouth feels really, really dropped. I'm not a huge fan of that for this bean. Go ahead and I'll keep babbling on while you make the Carraro with this same one. And that's because, for me, this bean just doesn't have a whole lot of fruity flavors. And so I feel like we've just gotten a bit too much bitter here, and we've strayed too far from the nature of this coffee, which to me is baker's chocolate with a little bit of fruit. And they talk about cherry, we talk about the red fruit flavors coming out of that. So possibly if we ground this finer, and is this the one that you did a long shot at 50 seconds of these beans?
Yes.
Yes, and you really like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was a very smooth shot?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what Mark did earlier during the testing, because he spent the day prepping for this, is like a 45, 50 second version.
53. Actually.
53 seconds, okay. Londinium with those dark art beans, and he much preferred it to, I think, like a 35 second shot you did. And so I'm not going to say Londinium's the wrong profile. I'm going to say with these beans that are darker, not very fruity, I would want to grind finer and have less dripping. And I'd want the shot to last longer. And Londinium, remember, is a lever machine. Lever machines are generally for classic coffee beans. Some of them can do other beans, but that's what their design was for. So I would highly recommend the Londinium with a grind that's a bit finer. And that might just do what you like. All right, so here we have something quite a bit finer. And we're now on Carraro, which are the medium light beans from Alchimiste. So, but I think what we're going to find is because they're lighter, as the pressure increases, they're going to extract at a reasonable rate. Because these lighter roast beans are not going to have nearly as much puck resistance. We're also, So we're also using a grinder that doesn't have a lot of fines. And what happened here, which is one of the things I find very interesting at Londinium, is pressure went up, flow is going up. Notice the flow being nice and linear. Again, nice extraction. But at this flow rate here, the programming for Londinium says that's as fast as we want to go. The Londinium is not optimized for light roast beans that want really fast flow rates. It's optimized really for medium light, medium dark. And when this flow rate went too high, it switched from being pressure profiled to being flow profiled and dropped the flow from this higher rate here to 2 mils per second. And that caused the pressure to crash. Now, that's essentially a safety measure. The shot is being salvaged, especially since all shots, as the puck degrades, puck resistance goes down. If you hold pressure, flow will go up. That's what we're seeing here. The problem is, this is why we don't like 9-bar machines, is in the last 5-10 seconds, that flow is going really fast, you're getting a lot of acidity. Londinium is preventing that by saying, when the shot gets too fast, let the pressure drop and go back to flow. Let's have a taste. Tell me what you're tasting there.
Well, first of all, you can really taste the fruity driven profile from this bean. And also, I really like after I swallow it, there's still a lot of flavor coming out.
Yeah, a lot of length.
Yes.
30 seconds in, and the flavors are still there.
Yes.
It isn't, and it didn't actually hit me as quite as hard as the other one.
Yes.
It wasn't a full cup the same way. Yeah, I agree. This is now, I don't know, we're now 60 seconds in, and I'm still getting length and flavors. I don't get any baker's chocolate.
No. Yes.
On this, we're now kind of like a mid-roast, if not light roast chocolate, and it's not a blend. Like, it doesn't taste like a light roast bean, but it's very fruit forward.
Yes. Yeah.
I still can milk this. Acidity is not bad. Like, it's what they call pleasing acidity, right? Like, the balance is nice. It isn't acidity like a channeled shot or a citric acid.
Yep.
It's fruit. It's acidity like you might find into a fruit. And this is a quite successful shot. At home, I pull these. I pull these quite fast, actually. I have a niche, and I'm pulling the same beans. I'm pulling it as a 23-second shot, and that's because I'm coarser. I don't have a ton of dripping because the niche has got fines. So I'm still in this sort of dripping range. So really focusing on dripping only makes sense if we've got the same grinders. So he's quite fine here on this grinder in order to keep this dripping under control. But he's so fine that the shot was 31 seconds. My morning shot is 23 seconds, same amount in cup. In both cases, very fruity. The shorter length, the faster shot with a grinder that has fines is going to keep the higher flow and give you more fruit. With no fines, you might want to grind finer. All right, let us go to adaptive. Now, the main thing that's going to change with adaptive is this section here that's pressurized is not going to be pressurized anymore. And that's because adaptive is meant to work with light roasts and medium roast beans. And with light roast beans, this is a terrible idea. The dripping really goes high. So, but with the medium roast bean, adaptive is going to work okay. We're going to see his pressure go up here, and then the flow will cut, and the water just cuts out, and the pressure is just going to decline on its own. If you have very light roast, the pressure will just crash quickly, and you have a soak. And the difference is that when you keep pressure on the puck, you're going to generally have more crema, because you took the puck and you compressed it and you held it compressed. And then when you rise the pressure, it never expanded, it didn't bloom. You also get this very nice smooth curve. So if you're struggling with this nice pressure rise here, avoiding gushers, Londinium's going to be better because it's going to have this compressed puck. However, if your beans are on the lighter side, you might have a really hard time controlling this dripping here. And that's why you might want to use adaptive. That's not going to have that. But adaptive not pressurizing during this dripping time, it's going to make the pressure rise be more stressful for the coffee puck and more likely to channel. Okay, so here we are pressurizing. You can see the flow is significantly higher. So quite different than Londinium. Same grind or different grind?
Different grind. Yeah.
What did we do with the grind here?
So in the Londinium, the grind was 1.1, and this is 1.3.
Okay, so we've gone coarser with adaptive.
Yeah.
Okay. Why did we go coarser?
So in my testing before, we find that this bean, in particular, if I grind it a little bit coarser compared to Londinium, it just extra better.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we had the fast fill, and you can see the water just cut off and went to 0, and you can see pressure, instead of staying at 3, started to come down, but it didn't crash. And it's great that it didn't crash. So these are, these are Ethiopian beans, which will tend to have more fines as well. So the fact that we're using a low fines grinder is somewhat mitigated by the fact that we're using a high fines bean. And the reason I can see that is this pressure didn't crash. If I had some other beans that had less fines in them, this pressure is more likely to go down. That's fine. That's what adaptive's meant for, but it's also one of the reasons these beans in that grinder worked on Londinium, because the fines worked to hold things here. So some of the things to notice, the second thing about adaptive is when the pressure rises, it times out after 6 seconds. It says that's enough. Where did we reach? We reached 6.5 bar, and then the flow rate was maintained. So remember when we're doing the flow rate shot, the second profile, we were saying you have to dial in the flow rate to the grind. This is doing that for you. This pressurized stage is determining the coarseness of the grind. So in 6 seconds, we pressure up, see where the flow rate is. That's the flow rate we want. Continue here. If this was very finely ground, this would go to the max, the flow would be down here, and we'd have a slow flow rate. So that's quite handy. Adaptive is essentially taking that flow profiled shots, but doing it automatically as is appropriate to your grind and bean. I feel like that's a really major innovation. It makes your life a whole lot simpler. And as your bean changes day to day, as it ages, you don't have to necessarily get the grind right, so the profile is going to automatically adjust the flow profile. So let's, who tasted this yet? I don't think we have.
No.
So. Tell me what you're tasting there.
I feel like this one, the adaptive.
Yep.
The fruitiness tastes more like a citric, more. I would say it's more obvious acidity compared to the previous one. The aftertaste still quite strong. Probably not as long, as lengthy as the previous one, but it's more like a layer-driven taste.
I feel like we're making this more and more taste like a light roast.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Yeah. And so that's one of the things I quite like about medium light beans. It's one of the reasons that's our house bean, is that depending on how we profile it, we can make it kind of muted and nice with milk, all the way to something that a light roast person will be okay with. And at this point, I'm not even necessarily getting chocolate. It's more like carob. It's pulled back on that. The roast flavors are very minor. It still tastes like coffee, if you know what I mean. Like, it doesn't taste like tea, which some beans can do. And he's gone coarser also to try and accentuate that light roastness of this. You could go finer with this, with adaptive, but this wouldn't be the profile I would do that with. If you go finer, I would go with Londinium that maintains that shot, gives you a really thick one. So you've got Dflow next, and the reason I put Dflow at the end is Dflow is not a profile. Dflow is the family of profiles that look like Londinium. And what I mean by that is they're fast fill, soak time under pressure, and then rise pressure, and then some stuff happens. So let's pull up the Dflow and let's take a look. All right, so advanced Dflow. So first thing you'll notice is the shot editor is completely different, and I'll walk you through it. The idea here is that instead of having all the programming steps of a profile, what's been done here is the coffee relevant variables are all here. And you adjust the coffee relevant variables here of the Londinium family. And this line here, this chart here is going to change. So your dose weight and the temperature of the pre-infusion, this part here, temperature of the infusion here. There's also temperature here for the extraction, which is this part here, right? Infuse here and pour here. The pressure here is this, which is how much pressure to leave during the soak time. And you could bring that down to 0 and have it work like adaptive if you set down on 0. Now, this infusion here is saying infuse until either. And it's a bit of a swap here in terms of it's not really doing what it's saying, because there's time, volume, and weight. Time is 1 minute, volume is 100 mils, weight is 4 grams. Of those, only one is actually relevant, because Dflow is assuming you own a scale. And with a scale, it's going to wait for 4 grams of dripping, and then it's going to move on to the next step. That's a quite neat concept, because what it's saying is that if your grind is really coarse, let's just have a short infusion time. And if your grind's really fine, let's wait until it's really saturated. Now, the reason that's useful is that if you grind too fine, you might not give enough time for the whole puck to saturate. There's kind of 2 reasons to have this infusion time. One is just to let all the beans soak, but the other is to make sure the whole puck is fully saturated. That's why it's called pre-infusion. When the infusion happens, you think that the whole puck is now wet and you're going to extract. But if you look at the bottom of a 9-bar espresso, you'll notice that water, or the coffee, starts coming out within like 3 seconds. And it comes out of specific spots of the puck, and then after a few seconds, the whole puck is extracting. And that's because if you hit a puck really hard without any pre-infusion, it's going to find certain faster paths, and then from there, the water is going to spread out. And so you get less of an extraction, but also an uneven extraction, because those first spots where the coffee first came out will have had the most time with the water. And this is trying to fight that. What it's doing is putting water on the puck resists, and then water is mostly turned off. But there's still pressure on it. And the reason for the pressure is to push the water as quickly as possible through the whole puck. So if you have a medium to dark roast bean, you look below, when the water comes in, you might just see like very typically what's called donut extraction. So you'll see coffee coming from the outside and then slowly coming in and filling on the inside. This is making sure that the pressure doesn't rise until the whole coffee puck is wet. And that's going to give you a much more even extraction. It's also going to avoid channeling, because pushing water through a puck that has dry and wet spots is really asking for more channeling. So this Londinium recipe, and I got, hats off to the guy who invented this machine, because this is really a good way to make coffee. It was a big aha moment for me to realize that the Slayer style pre-infusion, which is slower water flow, was less good than this, because that just used capillary action, so water going to the next parts and slowly spreading. And the problem with the capillary action is it's quite slow for the whole puck to get wet. But if you do capillary action under pressure, then the whole puck gets wet much quicker, and you get a much more even extraction, you get a higher EY extraction yield as well. So that's what's going on here. So 4 grams dripping, temperature on the extraction, and then this is the clever bit. Instead of defining pressure and or flow, you define both. And what he's doing here is he's saying the maximum flow rate I want is 1.7 mils per second, but I also don't want to go over 8.5 bar. So what's going to happen here? And I had to sort of look at this, and then that Damon guy, he's pretty clever. Because what's going to happen here is 2 different possible shots. One, your grind is too fine. You're just going to have an 8.5 bar shot. Nothing wrong with that. It's going to be a perfectly good traditional shot, 8.5 bars. If your grind is about right, what's going to happen is you're going to hit 8.5 bar, your puck is going to erode, your flow rate's going to go up, it's going to go faster than 1.7 mils per second, and then flow is going to kick in and control flow. That, I know I just said a whole lot of stuff, but that's what Londinium just did. But he simplified it down to just two variables. There. And then if you're too coarse and you can't get anywhere near 8.5 bar and your flow rate starts to go way up, you're going to get a kind of sweet and gentle shot. It's going to keep the flow rate under 1.7. The pressure is going to rise to whatever 1.7 mils per second does, and then it's going to go down as the puck erodes. So it's like these little two things here. He's simplified three profiles right in there, right? There's an Italian espresso, flat 9 bar, E61, if you're ground too fine. If you're just right, it's going to look like Londinium. And if you're a bit too coarse, it's going to do a sweet and gentle. I was pretty impressed. So I don't think enough people spend time working on Dflow. And what I just explained about how the profile is essentially mimicking different profiles based on what happens to the grind size, that's pretty clever. And when I've asked people, go ahead and pull the shot. When I've asked people, are you mostly making good espresso, occasionally making good espresso, or never making good espresso? The people who were in the always making good espresso camp, the profiles that got mentioned over and over were Dflow, extramundo, and adaptive. Those are the profiles. And the thing about all three of those is they all have their own approach for dealing with the grind being in various ways. Extramundo being what I'd recommend for people who are using light roasts. Adaptive, a good medium. Londinium, also a good medium. Dflow, good everywhere. If you've got light roast beans and you want to have a much longer time here, I would lower this pressure down to 0 and increase the time or the dripping. So what we're going to see here is where our grind is. And we are still on the fruity Carraro beans. And this could be anything. I don't know how the grinds are set up. All right, so this is quite fine. You can see the pre-infusion grams are quite low. So we might get a traditional shot here that looks kind of like a flat 8.5 bar. Advancing to next step because we got 4 grams there. Not what I expected. And partially it's the beans. So this was ground quite fine. We didn't have much dripping, but then we didn't get much pressure. Probably very long soak time meant that we weren't able to make much pressure. But let's taste it. So there we are. Not a whole lot of crema, which is to be expected because we didn't get much pressure. So what do you think that?
It doesn't taste like the same thing actually. There's more, almost like floral flavor coming out.
Yeah, like kind of rose kind of thing. Can you do me a favor? Go 2 settings finer on your grind, and let's just pull the same shot. Because I want to show Dflow adapting. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to have even less here, and hopefully a higher pressure.
Okay, so, fine it. Got it.
Right, so you see that donut extraction? See how the center is dry? That's what this pressurized soak is doing. Is it's waiting to rise pressure until now the whole puck has been wet. And what that means is now when the pressure is going to rise, hopefully we're going to see a shot that's a little bit more even. So we are seeing some extraction on the side. but it's still looking pretty good. So what this shot did, we once again did 3.7 mils. It took longer for our pre-infusion to give us that time. And I think these light roasted beans are having trouble giving pressure after a long soak. That's the bean, and that's a combination also of the grinder not having fines. And if I were using the niche, I could go coarser, and I would still get not much dripping, and then the pressure would go up higher. And again, that linear extraction on constant flow. Remember I said if the flow rate's too high, it'll limit it to 1.7, which is what happened here. We got a 1.7 flow rate. The top was 1.8, ending in 1.7 here. And then some sort of pressure came out. And this is indicating, in the end, I would say the puck prep distribution was not great on that, because at the beginning we could see like one side got water and then the outside, and it took quite a long time for the whole puck to get wet. But it didn't matter too much, because this very long soak under pressure repaired the puck. And I know it repaired it because we were able to rise in pressure and then have a nice linear extraction even though we had constant flow. So I really love this pressurized long soak as a way to heal a puck that hasn't been that homogeneous. Tell me what you taste there.
I feel like this one, compared to the previous one, there's definitely more flavor coming out. Mm-hmm. And the aftertaste is pretty long, actually. Yeah.
It's a really good shot.
Yeah.
I'm really impressed with this shot. I agree with almost like a concentrated mango coming in, which I haven't really gotten until now. Also has some mouthfeel, which is great. Tremendous length, dried mango, like chew stuff is what I'm imagining. And still some nice chocolate. I mean, who doesn't like chocolate bars with some mango bits in it? That's a nice thing, right? And the shot looks beautiful. What's interesting about Dflow is because it triggers here based on weight, you can have a very long soak. And I could have changed it and been time-based, like Londinium and Adaptive is, and that would give different flavors. But the whole point of this profile is that once you know a bit about extraction theory and the relationship between pressure and soak time, then you can just directly adjust those without becoming a profile programmer. And I feel like that's a major contribution to be able to apply your coffee knowledge and your tasting knowledge without having to become so technical. So give that a try. Thanks for watching. Now we're going to just quickly do some of the questions that have come in. And there's a bunch of questions about, is this time correct? Like, is 35 to 45 seconds correct? Is this OmniRose correct? There's no such thing as correct. Coffee is way too complicated. You're going to have to taste. And you're going to have to say, I like that more, I like that less. Look at the chart and go, okay, I taste now thinner and that line is lower. I think John talked about that. And so if this pressure goes down, you're going to have less mouthfeel because you've got less pressure. More pressure gives you more mouthfeel. Do you want more mouthfeel or do you want more fruit? It's up to you. But what's interesting is if you stick with the same bean, then the curves looking a certain way are going to give you certain flavors. And you're going to know what it tastes like before you taste it if you've seen that curve before. I hope that was helpful. There's no shortcuts. AI is not going to solve the human palate, nor the complexity of these coffees. Thanks for watching.